வணக்கம் நண்பர்களே. யானி கூறினபோல் எனது பேர் குமரன் நடேசன். Conduit குழுவின் சார்பாக இன்று என்னை இங்கே பேச அழைத்த மிதுரன் மற்றும் மனோகரன் சகோதரர்களுக்கு எனது நன்றி. இந்த நிகழ்ச்சி ஆரம்பமாக முதல் பாரதியின் கவிதை ஒரு பாட்டு வடிவம் மற்றது ஒரு நடன வடிவமாக இங்கே நாங்கள் பார்த்திருந்தோம். மிக பொருத்தமான ஒரு ஆரம்பம் என்று நான் கருதுவேன். அந்த பாடலை கேட்கும் போது எனக்கு இன்னொரு கவிதை, பாரதியாரின் கவிதை ஞாபகத்துக்கு வந்துள்ளது. அந்த கவிதையின் இறுதி ஸ்டான்ஸா அதில் கூறுவார், பல வேடிக்கை மனிதரை போல் நாம் வீழ்வோம் என்று நினைத்தாயோ, அந்த வேடிக்கை மனிதர்கள் தமிழர்களா என்ற ஒரு சந்தேகம் எனக்கு இங்கு இருந்துள்ளது. நாம் வீழ்க மாட்டோம். அது தமிழர்கள் மட்டுமல்ல, வடக்கு கிழக்கு பிரதேசங்களில், இலங்கையின் வடக்கு கிழக்கில் இருக்கும் வேறு சிறுபான்மை மக்களும் அதுக்குள் அடங்குவார்கள் நான் நம்புகிறேன். That said, what I'm really here to talk to you all about today is healing through music and dance and the performing arts in the north and east of Sri Lanka. I'm completely indebted to the Carnatic Youth Society of Canada for giving this opportunity and to understand the need and the role of the arts in empowering and transforming lives, not only in Canada but in Sri Lanka. The reason I speak in English, one, because I don't speak Tamil very well and I'm still learning as much as I can. But secondly, I feel that it is the young people, it's the young musicians and the young dancers in Toronto who need to take up this issue going forward. Because if this particular generation, the generation that the Carnatic Youth Society of Canada believes in, doesn't take this up, then our relatives, not only our relatives, those in Sri Lanka who need our help won't have really the help that they need. So I'll stop pontificating and get on the speech itself, or the presentation rather. Just a couple of things. I want to start with a very personal story. I'm going to try and keep this to 10 minutes as much as I can. Yana, you can signal me when I start rambling. In 2014, I went to Sri Lanka. I go to Sri Lanka very often. I went to Sri Lanka and I traveled extensively through the north and east in Jan of 2014. And I was taken to a school, the Jayapuram Mahavidyalayam in Kulinichi district, Mavatam. And in that school, I came across a very unexpected finding. I was taken to the shed almost, where there were a lot of students like between the ages of 6 to, I would say, 16. And they said, oh, you know, this Anna has come from Toronto, can you do something for him? And I said, okay, what do you guys like to do? They said, oh, we like dance, we like music. I said, okay, what kind of music? They said, oh, we learn Carnatic music. And it just completely surprised me, because this school is pretty much in the middle of nowhere in Kulinichi. It's not even on the A9 road, where a lot of traffic happens and people stop and look. It's more interior in Jayapuram, Malayalapuram. These are areas that are quite interior in Kulinichi. And they sang Shanmuga Priya Kirtanai, which is very odd because it is my favorite Kirtanai in the Shanmuga Priya Raga. And it completely blew my mind. I just want to show you a clip and then I'll get into the presentation itself. Raghavan, do you mind playing that video clip for me? Thank you.
Nam
Very good. Thank you. Obviously, that's a Kirtanai by Sri Papanasam Shivan, who is an amazing Tamil composer of the Tamil Trinity, and it's only appropriate because Tamil is something that I think Carnatic Youth Society is very interested in encouraging in Toronto, so it's appropriate on so many different levels. So that clip I show you as an example of the possibility that music holds for these kids in the north and east of Sri Lanka. And I say kids, but they're also students at the London O-level age, 15, 16 as well, involved in some of these schools. And before I get into what we are actually here doing for the Church of the American Islam Mission, I want to give you a bit of a background, especially for young people here, in terms of what is going on in Sri Lanka and the backdrop that all of this happens in. So, since the end of the war in 2009, in May 2009, the war is over, but the conflict exists, it remains, it persists. And there is the idea of the constant vulnerabilities of communities that live and work and study in areas of Sri Lanka that are still highly securitized. So these kids live next to army camps, they live next to a lot of military intelligence officers, and there's constant surveillance. So we were with the Catholic Church, and so we were not followed as much in Clinici, but we were being surveillanced all the time. And we come from privilege, right? In the diaspora, we speak English, they know we come from abroad, we have access to corridors of power in Ottawa, but these kids don't, and their parents don't, and they live in that very sort of fraught kind of situation. And yet, they want to learn music, and they see it as a way of bringing healing for themselves and their families and their communities. And you'll also notice something else very interesting in that clip, is the number of female students in that school. And that is not entirely different in Sri Lanka. There are 90,000 war widows in Sri Lanka since the end of the war, and female-headed households on the rise, because a lot of them, the men have either been killed or have gone missing. And so there is this disproportionate impact that women face as a result of the conflict and the war itself. And so it raises the notion of music and dance as mediums for healing and for empowerment and true social transformation. And we hear about the fact that, you educate a boy, you educate one person, you educate a girl, you educate the family. And that is very much true. It's the role of what women have in this healing process, I think. And I think this is mirrored by the role that young diaspora musicians, Pulambeda Makkal Ayana, and musicians in the diaspora, like yourselves, and artists like yourself, what role do you have to play in creating impact through the arts, not only in Sri Lanka, but abroad as well, in other countries as well? Having said that, the Church of the American Islam Mission. So the funds from today's Sangeeta Sagar event is actually going to be donated to the Church of the American Islam Mission. I am not in any way affiliated with the church. I have a very good friend of mine, Dr. Darshan Ambalavanar, who chose to return to Sri Lanka, living a rather comfortable life in Toronto, to do social projects in the north and east, working with war-impacted communities. The church is a church. It's based in the American Islam Mission, which was established in 1816 in Jaffna. But the work that they do, the social projects that they do, are non-religious and non-denominational, and they do it in solidarity with war-affected communities in the north and east. And they focus on a few different programs. One is education for children and youth, children's homes, women's programs, and children with mental disabilities. And it's the education program that the funds from today, or part of the funds from today, is going to be funding. And there are five different programs that happen under the education program. One is preschool programs, and there are 35 centers in Badiklo, Jaffna, Banni, and Upcountry that serve about 1,000 children. There's after-school programs, so these are programs almost like tuition classes, but a bit more than that. That happens in schools, much like in Jaipur Mahavidyalayam. And they have 8 such schools or programs in Jaffna, Banni, and Badiklo that serve 1,200 students. And there's leadership development, there is teacher support, and there's vocational training as well. And so today's funds are going to go fund music education in the after-school programs in Kununchi and Bariklo especially. Because one of the things that we don't want to do is, as much as Carnatic... Should I slow down?
You're good, go right.
Okay. Oh, okay, I have time. Oh God, I feel sorry for all of you. There's always a notion about Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam as Jaffna being the custodians of these arts, and that is absolutely not the case. I think music is common for everyone. It's meant to serve all. And so the idea of the eastern provinces in Mattaplapu and Thiruvannamalai and the children and youth who also want to learn Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam dance is very important to this idea, and I'm really glad that CYSC saw the merit in that. So it's going to go to a school program in Bariklo, and it's going to go to a school program in Jaffna. That's what I'm essentially trying to say. So the target very much, as you know today, is to raise about 11, maybe 12, maybe more, if there are more generous people in the crowd today. And it's going to be split between, about $12,000 is what we're trying to raise here today, and we're trying to split that between the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, as well as about 5,500 Canadian dollars for the Church of the American Swan Mission. The money is going to be spent in a few different ways, and much of this is thinking and conversations that we're having with the church right now, and we'll keep you posted. I think CYSC is completely committed to transparency, and we want to keep you posted in terms of how the money is going to be funded, where it's going to go, what kind of measurement and evaluation are we going to do to make sure that the money is actually spent in the way it should be spent. So it's going to support music and dance education as part of the after-school program at Jayapuram, the school that we just saw in Kununchi district, and in Naru Mahavidyalayam in Bariklo. And the idea is very much to teach classical arts to students and children in these after-school programs, so, Carnatic music, Bharatanatyam dance, but to also, and this is a very important point, to also recognize that there are traditional folk arts that need to be celebrated and taught to our next generation. So Kuthu, Paraisai, and those kinds of music, which are just as important as the classical arts, right? There's no such thing as classical arts and folk arts in my mind. All art is art, and one isn't better than the other. So we have Paramparya Isai, we have Carnatic music, so how do we make these sometimes very different worlds meet for the next generation? The idea is to hire graduates from Jaffna University's Department of Fine Arts as instructors at each of these centers for at least 1 year. We also want to make sure that, in addition to teaching, that we provide students with musical instruments. Sometimes they may not have the appropriate instruments, and supporting educational materials that they may need in order to have a holistic sort of education and training in classical and folk arts in the North and East. It's very much a new idea that is being piloted by the church. It's something that I spoke to my friend Dr. Ambalavana about, and he's happy to try it on a pilot to see what we can get out of this. So it's going to be run as a pilot for the first 3 months, and then we're going to formalize the program based on feedback for the remainder of the first year. And it's also important to note that the funds collected today is not going to be just sent in one shot to the church to spend or to invest. It's going to be held in trust. We're not quite sure if that's going to be held in trust here in Toronto or in Sri Lanka itself, but it's going to be held in trust. And that's important because we need to make sure that we come up with metrics and key performance indicators that evaluate the effectiveness of aid giving. Because I think as a community, we've always given, and we're very generous, and we're very kind, and we care. But we don't always understand what is the impact of aid giving. And this is not a problem just for Sri Lanka, it's a problem in terms of when we give to Africa as well, right? So how much is that dollar that we're going to spend going to go in terms of as an investment in the future of these children? So we want to make sure that we set performance targets, and I think young people here who've studied and grown up in the educational system in Canada understand the importance, and those of you who work in corporate Canada understand the importance of performance indicators and performance targets. So we want to make sure that we establish those targets, and it's when those targets are met that the rest of the funding is then released or staggered to the church. What I also want to talk to you about is about the network that I'm here to represent, which is called Conduit. And Conduit, I'd like to take a little bit of time to speak about Conduit, because I think this involves a change in the way we think about what is going on in Sri Lanka. For many years, we've only given money, and that is more or less what we've given. What is even more important is, I think, we need to find a way to transfer knowledge capital. There are retired people amongst you, there are professionals amongst you, there are recent graduates amongst you. So how do we tap into the knowledge capital that the diaspora has and take it to Sri Lanka and help these war-impacted communities build sustainable livelihoods over a long run? So what a few of us did back in April of 2014, a few of us meaning a lot of us are young professionals, so I work for the Government of Ontario, I'm a civil servant for the province. There are bankers on the group, there are doctors, lawyers, arts, people in the arts, there are civil servants, and we came together as a network of professionals, as an independent network. So we're not affiliated with any organizations in the diaspora, we're an independent network of professionals. And what we're trying to do is to strengthen community-based sustainable development efforts that empower vulnerable communities in war-affected, underdeveloped, rural and remote regions of Sri Lanka. So the focus is very much on the north and east, but we understand that there are needs elsewhere in Sri Lanka as well that need to be met. And the idea is very much about seeing if we as a community are ready to go beyond remittance and aid economies and go into knowledge capital economies, knowledge-based economies in Sri Lanka. And what is our role as a diaspora in helping build knowledge capital again, to reverse the brain drain that has gone on in Sri Lanka for the past 30 years. So as a result of this, we launched a very exciting program that we're all very excited about. It's called the Associateship Program. It's our very first year. And essentially what we've done is we are going to be funding 5 positions for people in the diaspora, young professionals, industry veterans and retired people who have skill sets to actually go and spend some time in Sri Lanka for 1 month minimum, or long if you can, to actually live with these communities and work with them, and work with the organizations that support these communities. So we are looking for an English teacher, we are looking for a special education teacher to work with kids with autism and Down syndrome, we're looking for vocational instructors who can teach graphic design and IT and electronics and so on. We're looking for leadership facilitators. A lot of you are leaders, I think, and there are leaders emerging in our diaspora community all the time, so can you help build leaders in other parts of the world? And we're looking for administrative program advisors, so database analysts, people who know how to do report writing, people who can teach how to do donor relations, people who are good at organizational strategies, stakeholder engagement, those kinds of things. So the location is, for most of these positions, you can either choose to work in Badiklo, you can work in Coimbatore, you can work in Karinagar, you can work in Klinichi, or you can work in Nuwara. And the length is a minimum 1 month. And in fact, your stay and all expenses, all the costs of that program, 50% of that is going to be funded by Conduit. And if you think that you're a remarkable candidate, we'll actually fund 100% of your stay to go to Sri Lanka and do this work with the communities there. Because I think this is what is needed. As much, and believe me, the money is needed, but more than money, people want to have skills and knowledge that make themselves employed. There is one thing I say, I think I'm probably going to be quoted and misquoted for saying this, but I don't actually believe it serves anyone to send money to Jaffna anymore. What is needed in Jaffna is different kinds of things. What they need is help with entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. They need help with skills-based learning. So we need to make sure that when we think of the North and East, we don't put them all in one bucket. In Mullaitivu, Mullibaikal, like in those kinds of areas, they need financial aid for sure. But in other areas, they need other kinds of needs. So it's like we need to make sure that we understand the nuances and the layers that are present in Sri Lanka, and to respond to those layers as needed, as appropriate. So that's essentially what Conduit is. So we're looking for these programs. If you or anyone you know thinks, or you think can fit the bill for these kinds of associateship opportunities in Sri Lanka, please reach out to me. I'll be here hopefully until the end of the show. If I'm not around, you can always reach out to me through the Carnatic Youth Society. We have more information. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're especially on LinkedIn, because this is a very professional-based organization. We're on LinkedIn as well, so feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, so I think the idea very much is thank you for coming, thank you for your generosity, thank you for your time and listening to what we have to see and what we have to show for you today. But when you leave here, think of what else can we do beyond giving money. As much as that is important, what can we do in terms of transferring skills and knowledge to empower these communities in the north and east of Sri Lanka? Because I think that is what is going to make the difference. And I'll end this with one last slide, which is the key context. So you can reach out to Midran Manogran. He's the young man with a nice verdi from CYSC. You can reach out directly to the church itself through Dr. Darshan Ambalavanar, who's based out of Batiklo. Or you can reach out to me, Kumaran at Conduit, and you can just go to the website, email us, phone us. The last thing I would like to end is as I said, I spent a lot of time in the North and East in January of 2014, and we had a lot of conversation, especially with women's groups in the North and East, especially in Klinichi. And we met with groups like Mahashakti and Yuva Shakti, and these are groups that are independently organized by women. They're not supported by any government, they're not supported by INGOs, not really. These are just people coming together, resilient people coming together to do their own thing. And one older woman pulled me aside and said in Tamil, Thambi, "Ningal vande ellaam kadaichittu poringal, idukku appuram enna nadakka pogudu. நாங்கள் என்ன எதிர்பார்க்கிறோம்னா புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழாக்கள் நீங்கள் வந்து அங்கே கஷ்டப்பட்டு தான் நீங்கள் எல்லாம் சம்பாதிக்கிறீங்க, அந்த காசு எங்களுக்கு அனுப்ப வேணும் என்று நாங்கள் சொல்லவே இல்லை. எங்களுக்கு என்ன வேணுமெண்டா வெளிநாட்டில் இருக்கிற ஆட்கள் இங்கே வந்து ஒரு ஃபேக்ட்ரியை தொடங்கவோ இல்லாட்டி ஒரு பிஸ்னஸை தொடங்கி எங்களுக்கு ஒரு வேலை வாய்ப்புகளை உருவாக்கி தந்தாலே அது பெரிய விஷயம். They are no longer looking for aid, especially women, and this is important because I think a lot of these female-headed households are headed by women, and they said, we are not looking for aid. What I need is a full-time job. I can then take care of my children. So what role do we in Toronto, in London, in Paris, in Melbourne have in order to change the conversation from aid to economic development and empowerment? And part of that transition comes from knowledge. So we need to be able to build knowledge capital so that when we bring in factories, when we start taking businesses, they will actually have the skill sets to get employed in those factories and in those businesses and then help themselves. This is a long-term thing. Like, we can always cut a check, and I want you to cut a check. And I'm not contradicting myself. I want you to cut those checks. But also think about what else can I do other than cutting a check? Because cutting a check is quite easy, I think, at the end of the day. Can you take the time? Can you think of other kinds of ways of contributing to those people? I'm not here to preach. I'm only here to ask for your help and advice and support. Once again, please reach out to Midran or Dr. Ambalavana or myself, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about these kinds of conversations in the diaspora, because this is where it's going, and there are a few other people who think like us in the crowd. Please spread the word. And once again, thank you so much for coming. Nagaland.